Hello and welcome back. Now, Cole Caulfield did not get off to the best start this year, but he's now on a 5-game goal scoring streak, 6-game point streak with 5 goals, 3 assists, 8 points, 4 power play points, and 27 shots in those 6 games, and that's not even the best news. So before the All-Star game, he's got 16 goals, 24 assists, 40 points in 76 games, but after the All-Star game, 84 games, 48 goals, 23 assists, and 71 points. So he comes alive in the second half of the season. Now, he's 85% owned, so you'll have to trade for him if you want that production. But if you want to find some streamers for Week 16 who aren't 85% owned, you've come to the right place. So let's jump right into the schedule for Week 16. 51 games this week, spread out pretty nicely. Light nights are maybe Monday and Wednesday, depending on how many games you classify as a light night. But definitely Friday and Sunday, 4 games and 2 games respectively. There are a couple of teams here at the bottom who only have 2 games this week, Colorado and Toronto. So if you're playing McKinnon, if you're playing Matthews, this is the perfect week to do that. Hopefully that works out for you if you're going up against them this week. I'm against McKinnon this week as I'm recording this, so I wish it was 1 week further ahead so I didn't have to play him, as he's absolutely on fire. But you do have a bunch of teams that play 4 times this week. You've got LA, Vegas, St. Louis, Florida, Chicago, Columbus, Boston, and Arizona. Now, not all of these schedules are created equal. The best schedule is LA, all the light nights, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday. There are a couple of other teams here who play that Friday, Sunday. You've got St. Louis. They're in Seattle and then home against LA. And then you also have Seattle, who plays both games home against St. Louis and Columbus. So we will feature a couple of these teams going forward in the next couple of slides. But for now, if you wanted that alternative play to get maximum games played, there are 2 teams that play the Monday-Tuesday back-to-back. You've got Vegas, who's on the East Coast trip in New Jersey and on Long Island. Now, the Islanders got a new coach. That could be a difficult game. But right now, this is setting up to be a relatively high-scoring game against New Jersey, unless they can find some goaltending really quick. But then you also have San Jose, who's at LA, and then home against the Rangers on Tuesday. So those 2 teams play the Monday-Tuesday back-to-back front-loaded. You pick up somebody from one of those 2 teams, then you drop them Wednesday morning and pick up somebody from either Seattle or LA or St. Louis. So those are some of your options in terms of maximizing your roster for the schedule. But as I mentioned, one of these teams will start it off with the perfect Monday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, and that is LA. Now, the Kings were in a tailspin. Since December 28th, they are 27th in the NHL in points, 2-6-4, a .333 points percentage. So in that span, they were also only scoring 2.17 goals per game, and they were still only giving up 3 goals against per game, which is not bad. As you can see at the bottom, we'll get to that goaltending section in a minute. But right now, there's not a lot going on offensively, especially with depth in terms of Kings adds. But right now, you do have the option of getting Philip Deneau, who's always been one of those streamer guys for me. Last year, it was the Deneau, Arvidsson, Moore line. This year, it's more with Deneau and Fiala. So that seems to be one of the productive lines. Fiala scored last night, I believe, and Deneau, I think, factored in on that as well. But 25% owned, 8 points in his last 8 games, 2 on the power play. So he is probably your best offensive streaming option from LA. But if you want those peripherals, Matt Roy, 19% owned, 20 shots, 17 hits, 19 blocks in his last 8 games played. So he's been getting it done. I picked him up for a stream over the weekend. He wasn't bad, not great. You're not getting a ton of offensive production. He does have 3 points in his last 8, but it's nothing crazy there. So you're mainly getting him for the peripherals. But if that's what you're looking for, he's been getting pretty decent top 4 deployment, and they do have that 4-game week, the perfect off-night setup this week. So in addition to those guys, one of the best offensive guys would be Trevor Moore. He's a little higher ownership, so that's why he's featured down here. And only 6 points in his last 8 games, but a nice even 3-goal, 3-assist split. And he is dual eligible, so that does help as well. But as we get to the bottom here, Dave Riddick and Cam Talbot, this is just kind of an alarming figure here if you're a Cam Talbot owner. He's been one of the best goaltenders all season long. He's been top 5 or top 3 on the Data Draft Goalie Hub this entire time. But in his last 5 games, no wins, 4.2 goals against, .874 save percentage, whereas Dave Riddick 7% owned, so he's very available right now. 4 games, 2 wins, 1.55 goals against, 945 save percentage. And this is still a really good defensive team. They aren't scoring as much, but they still do play really good defense. They held the Rangers without a shot for over 25 minutes last game, and that is not necessarily easy, even though the Rangers are slumping right now, which is pissing me off. But they did get excellent defensive play from their team, and that helps their goaltending. So any of these available options would be nice pickups, but if you're looking for a specific goaltender, Dave Riddick, I don't know how many starts he's going to get, but they should start leaning on him, as he's definitely been the better goaltender over the last 2 weeks plus. Now, another team with a really nice Friday-Sunday setup is the St. Louis Blues. They've got a 4-game week with that Friday-Sunday. And there's not a lot going on offensively that you can get access to. Mainly their offense is coming from Kyrou and from Robert Thomas. Buchnevich has been a little hot and cold, but you do have Braden Shen here, 31% owned, center left wing, dual eligible, which is nice. 2 goals, 4 assists, 6 points, 3 power play points, 15 shots, and 10 hits in his last 6 games. And that's been a consistent theme with him, is that hitting. As we look at his player hub, you can see he's 91st percentile in hitting, 1.86 hits per game. For a center is really nice to have. You get some blocks along with that, and then you get some power play production. Not a crazy amount of power play points, 7 on the season, but he is out there on the power play, which is nice if he can get you those power play points. If we look at his player trend here, a couple of weeks ago, he was as high as a 72.5. He dipped all the way as low as about a 63, 64, and he's been climbing up the last 2 weeks, improving each of those weeks. So he does still have some more room to improve to get back to where he kind of was earlier in the season when he was productive. So there is some room there if you pick him up this week for him to continue to improve as he's been doing the last 2 weeks. And that would be good news this week. With a 4-game week, you'd get a lot of volume, and hopefully you'd ride that hot streak. Now, another guy that we could talk about mainly for peripherals is Colton Parayko. So he's been one of those guys who, every now and then will get you that offensive production, but you're mainly adding him for his defensive play, mainly blocks. As we look at his hub, he does score a little bit in terms of goals. So 8 goals on the year is really good for a defenseman, which is why he's 94th percentile there. But he's also 94th in blocks, 2.5 blocks per game and a hit per game in that span as well. Now, he's been improving basically back since November 30th. There is a little bit of a dip here from the 24th all the way to the 7th. But after that, he's been back improving. So 2 weeks of improvement, a couple weeks of missing data, but then he is improving the last 2 weeks on top of that. So he's been one of the guys that's been relatively ownable, that is, getting something done for you, if not goal scoring or offensive production. At least he's going to get you the shots and the blocks over the last 6 games. So a couple different options for you. The goaltending, Joel Hofer has been pretty good. Binnington has been really good and has kind of climbed out of what he was doing previously. So that is good news if you're a Binnington owner. Hofer, not necessarily the best stats over the last couple of weeks, but he has been relatively reliable. If they do have to use him, you can probably stream him for one of those back-to-backs. Now, up next, we have the last team that has a nice Friday-Sunday, and that is the Seattle Kraken. So the Kraken, they have a couple of guys here who have been guys that I've looked at in the past, Jared McCann being one of those, 69% owned, and he's a guy that you could definitely count on for goals and shots last year. It's been a little bit harder to come by this year, but he's gotten hot, and he's got 7 points, 4 goals, 3 power play points in his last 5 games. The ownership is relatively high, and that is the case with a lot of these guys. But if you're in a shallow league, these guys need to be on your radar. So one of the things that we'll look at now, as I pull up McCann's hub, you can see he's been improving basically back since around Christmas time. So a huge improvement there to a 65, now up to a 68. And that's on the back of 92nd percentile goal scoring, 0.41 goals per game. That's pretty much what you would expect from him. You would expect a little bit higher shot volume, but it's not bad at 2.5 shots per game. And he is getting some power play points. So 12 power play points in 44 games, 0.27 power play points per game. Good for 90th percentile there. But another guy that we have to look at is Eli Tolvanen. So he's been one of these kind of surprises for me, at least in terms of his completeness rating. So really good in terms of blocks, hits, 91st percentile, 2.1 hits per game. Did dip a little bit, but was as high as an 83. So if you're looking at that in terms of the overall picture, he is now 32nd most complete player on the hub, which is crazy for a guy that was basically undrafted this year. So if you have him right now, I would definitely hold on to him for the peripherals and, hope that the offensive production comes. He has been a goal scorer. He's got 2 goals in his last 6 games, 5 points to go along with that, but you're mainly adding him for the peripherals and the hope that he can get some of those power play points and some of that offensive production ramped up. He's only 51% owned, so he's one of the better guys that you can go out there and grab in a 12-team league format. But if anybody's paying attention to that hit and block volume, they're probably owned up already. So we could take another look at Oliver Bjorkstrand, a guy that I mentioned a couple weeks ago in terms of a Seattle Kraken ad, 46% owned now. Very assist heavy, but decent shot volume and power play production. It's been kind of up and down. So he's been hovering in this range between a 66 and a 71. He did regress a little bit week to week, but he is one of those guys that, when the team wasn't scoring, he was offensively productive. 7 points in his last 6 games is still really nice. 2 power play points in that span, which is what you're mainly hoping to get out of him. Even if it's power play assists, that's what you're hoping to get from him. And at 46% owned, he is single position eligible, which does hurt a little bit, but he has been productive enough to hold on to for a couple weeks. So if you do have him, I would hold on to him for this week at least to get those light night games in there. But that's going to do it for the look at the teams. Let's take a look at some streaming options that you have this week. Now, our first guy is not necessarily a volume play, but we have to talk about him. I've been trying to pick him up. I have too many good wingers to be able to pick him up, and I'm also owning Konechny in 3 different leagues, so I don't want to stack that much, but Owen Tippett is on fire right now. 93rd percentile in goal production, 96th in shots, 3.63 shots per game, and it's been even better than that over the last 7 games, 4.4 shots per game, 8 points in his last 7, 2 power play points, obviously that really nice spinorama goal that he had the other night, but a hit and a half per game is another feature of his file that you definitely want to have. Not necessarily known for his power play production on the year, but he is getting a little bit more of that lately. 2 of his 4 power play points coming in the last 7 games. And if you look at his player trend, so he's been pretty consistently above a 70. That's his lowest point in the last 4 or 5 or 6 weeks, whatever this data set is capturing, but he's been skyrocketing up the boards. And when he gets his game in order like this, he is one of the best wingers that you can add. Dual position eligibility, 66% owned. He might not be there for you, but we do need to talk about him because if you're in a shallow league, you have to go out and grab him. He's red hot, and so are the Philadelphia Flyers. They did lose, but they are within 2 points of the division lead. So that is something that we have to take note of. And Owen Tippett is relatively hot. Joel Farabee is relatively hot. Obviously, Konechny is mainly owned up, but he was red hot last week as well. So a lot of good things happening in Philly, so that's why we're talking about them here. But another guy that is probably a little bit more ownable for you is Sam Bennett. Now, Bennett has been having this nice trajectory from a 55, 57, 60, 66, took a little bit of a step back. Now he's back up to a 67, and that's on the back of 4 points in his last 6, but 17 shots and 8 hits in that span. The hit volume is really nice, 1.42 hits per game. Power play production is starting to come. 7 power play points in 33 games is really nice to have there. 81st percentile in goals and 80th in shots per game. So he's relatively complete. And I think there is still more room to grow on this file. He was been as high as a mid-70s or upper 70s player in terms of completeness rating in the past. He hasn't necessarily hit his ceiling yet. He's only 27% owned, so there is still some value on his file. If you can go out and grab him, now might be the time. The Florida Panthers are red hot. At least they were red hot. They had a little bit of a slump there for a couple games where they did lose to New Jersey, and I believe they lost another game in there, but they are one of the best teams in the East, and Sam Bennett is getting some offensive production going now, and you're going to have that floor with the peripherals, at least with the hitting. Now, up next, so Sam Bennett obviously has a 4-game week this week. Florida was one of those teams. So does Charlie Coyle, and this is a guy who's been undervalued for most of the year. He's been relatively productive, if not very productive, depending on the time scale that you're looking at. 7 points in his last 7 games, 23 shots, so over 3 shots per game in that span, which is an improvement over his 2 shot per game average for the season. But he is a 78, so really complete. He did have a little bit of a dip here where he went from a 77 to a 72, but back up into this upper band where he's in a relatively complete state, not getting the power play production that you would want for some other guys, and there are some other centers that you could potentially have for power play production, but he is getting some peripherals, 1.1 hits per game and 0.71 blocks per game. The goal scoring is nice at 86th percentile there, so relatively complete, if not a little bit underwhelming. This is a guy you would pick up for consistent production if you're looking to get that plus volume over the week, instead of looking to throw a Hail Mary at the back end of the week and hope that somebody has a breakout game for you to get you back into things. So a much more consistent play for Charlie Coyle, 39% owned, so he's probably there for you in a bunch of different league formats. Now, up next, I was thinking about talking about the Columbus Blue Jackets, but they play 3 of their 4 games on all of those heavy nights, so it's not necessarily a play that you would want to make, but we are featuring Voronkov here for a reason. He's been one of those guys with a lot of hitting, and he's relatively productive offensively, given the fact that he is a hitter with lower ice time. So the hits aren't necessarily there in terms of lately, but earlier in the season, those were coming. But the shot volume over the last 2 games, 13 shots in his last 2 goals in that span, and he's getting some power play time. So this is one of those guys in a deep league. You could also go to Chinakhov, who's playing. Both Voronkov and Chinakhov are listed as first power play unit and top 6 right now, which is why I wanted to talk about both of these guys. You can obviously tell that Chinakhov is a little bit more of a goal scorer, a little bit less of a hitter. Both of them, relatively new to the power play deployment. So these guys are available. Chinakhov is 2% owned, Voronkov 1% owned. You could also go out there and try to grab Marchenko. His ownership is slightly higher, but not crazy higher. And he's been kind of tailing off. He had that really nice stretch late November into early December, dropped a bit. Now he's kind of middling in this section here, but he was a power play guy, was getting some power play production, 6 power play points on the year, and then a lot of those were goals. He did have that hat trick a couple weeks ago, probably a month and a half ago at this point, but he was one of those guys that I was riding for a couple weeks there, and very productive when I had him. But you also have Boone Jenner, who is back in the lineup, and he's one of their most complete players. So he was just going down because he was injured and not doing anything, but he's back in the lineup now, so you're getting the hits, 1.5 hits per game, 1.37 blocks per game. You're getting some goals, 93rd percentile there. Shot volume was really nice. So everything was pointing in the right direction for Boone Jenner before he got injured. Now that he's back from injury, he's 51% owned, so he may or may not be there for you in all your league formats, but if he's there, he's one of the most complete players. I drafted him this year. I was happy with his production. Then it started to tail off. I dropped him and picked up Vincent Trocheck, and man, has that paid off. But I wouldn't mind going back to Jenner if I wanted a complete centerman. So a couple different options for you from Columbus. Obviously, Johnny Gaudreau is playing relatively well, but it's very assist heavy. There are a number of ownable players in Columbus, and as I mentioned, they do play the heavier nights, so we're not necessarily going to feature them here. But we also have to take a look at Sean Durzi. Durzi, very owned up, may or may not be there for you, even in a 10-team, 12-team league. Still, he's one of those guys that we have to talk about because of the fact that he was available earlier in the year, lower ownership percentage, and people kind of had to drop him relative to his production, but he's been improving week over week. Look at this trend from a 74 all the way up to an 81. You can see here the goal production really good, 7 goals on the year in 38 games, 95th percentile there for a defenseman, 92nd in assists. Power play production's really good. Shot volume could be a little bit better, but he's getting 2.11 blocks per game. So you're getting that floor in terms of peripherals. This would be a categories coverage play for Sean Durzi, 75% owned. Again, probably not available. Just wanted to mention him. And if you're looking for defensemen, a guy that I've been featuring for weeks now, we also have to talk about one of the top 25 players this week in fantasy was Brock Faber. So look at his trajectory here from a 54 to a 61, 67, and now all the way up to a 74 in terms of completeness. And Jared Spurgeon is now out for the season, so he may be holding down that power play one's position. And in his last 7 games, 4 power play points, 6 points total, 14 shots, 18 blocks. So he's been doing a little bit of everything in terms of peripherals. Now he's getting the power play time. He's been getting it pretty consistently since he's been called up or since he's been relied upon on that power play unit. But now that Spurgeon's out, he may hold on to that for the entire season. So if he's available on your wire, I would definitely recommend going and picking him up, 49%. So he may or may not be there for you in a 12-team league, probably there for you in a 10-team league. And last but not least, we'll talk about TJ Oshie. And he is one of those guys that as long as he's in the lineup and healthy, you definitely want to have him. If he's not, it's very frustrating to know he's day to day or maybe, week to week, depending on what his injury is. He's always in and out of the lineup, but when he's in, he's relatively productive and he covers a lot of categories. So blocks, hits, 1.3 hits per game. You're getting some shot volume, and he's got 5 goals in his last 6 games to go along with 20 shots and 9 hits. So this is a guy who is, hopefully going to help Washington score some more. They've been very good defensively. Charlie Lindgren's been a great story this year, but they just haven't been able to score as much. Oshie's in and out of the lineup, so when he's in and he's scoring like this, he's helping the team stay competitive in that Metro division. 21% owned, so he's probably there for you in a 12-team league. Again, this is not necessarily a case of a 4-game week that you want to pay attention to, but just a guy who's playing relatively well right now, relatively complete, and it's goal heavy and hit heavy right now. So that's one of the reasons why we're featuring him here. But that's going to do it for the player ads this week. Next, we're going to take a look at the goaltending. Now, before we get into the individual goaltenders, I do want to mention that I've added this trending graph to the Player Hub, which we've been using in the previous slide, but we're also using it now here for the Goalie Hub. This is functionality that I wanted a long time ago, finally found a way to make it work and get it involved in the Player Hub and the Goalie Hub, so you can access both of those in the Patreon link in the description below. But we'll start off with Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen, 40% owned. He's got 3 wins in his last 5 starts, 947 save percentage, 1.21 goals against. And it's been a roller coaster for UPL owners, 53 down to a 40, and now all the way up to a 64. So the start volume is starting to come back because he's playing relatively well over that span. It's been going back a number of weeks now, and I believe he's the guy that they're going to lean on going forward. He's been outplaying Levi and Eric Comrie, so this is a guy that would potentially be a starter option. All of these guys at the top here should be potential starter options for you if you're looking for a medium-term replacement for somebody on the IR or whatever you're looking for. Now, another guy in that category is Sam Ersson. I talked about him last week. We've been talking about him for a while, and the Flyers in general because of their really good defensive play, 79th percentile in terms of team expected goals against. And this is pretty self-explanatory. 48, 58, 63, 69, and now up to a 72 on the goaltending hub. Sam Ersson is maybe taking the net over from Carter Hart. They do like Hart, and Hart has been pretty good in stretches this season. He was relatively, one of the better goaltenders in fantasy for the first chunk of the season, at least the first 20 or 25 games or so. But lately, Sam Ersson's been kind of stealing some starts and playing really well. 4 wins in his last 7 games, 936 save percentage, and a shutout. He's got 3 shutouts on the season. So Sam Ersson has been really reliable if you've been streaming him at whatever point in the season you've been grabbing him. Right now, he might be a 1A type of option. Instead of a starter, he's probably that, if not a really, really good 1B. And at 43% owned, he is probably there for you in a 12-team league, depending on how attentive your other managers are, because he's been doing this for a little while now. Same type of thing could be said about Alex Lyon. He came in last year and saved the season for the Florida Panthers, comes over to Detroit and pretty much does the same thing at a different point in the season. You can see here kind of up and down, and then all of a sudden starts to skyrocket, 54 to a 60, up to a 63. He's well above expected, 86th percentile there. The team defense isn't great, but he's been playing really well. 3 wins in his last 5, 927 in that span. So he is the guy that they're going to lean on for the foreseeable future, I would imagine. Husso is still out. They do have Reimer, who I did mention last week, but Alex Lyon seems to be their starter. And a starter at 56% ownership, he may or may not be there for you. And between the two of them, I would prefer Lyon a little bit over UPL, but UPL seems to be putting up the better numbers in this sample size, but it just comes down to preference. UPL's kind of been more up and down over the last 2 or 3 years for me. Lyon has been a little bit more consistent in that vein, which explains his ownership percentage, but any of these guys could be potential starters for you if that's what you're looking for. If you're looking for a streaming option, we did mention Dave Riddick, and this is, maybe a stream, but it's also something that we may have to monitor in terms of a starter backup relationship. So up here, you can see Cam Talbot still one of the best on the goalie hub, but you also have Riddick now, really good goals against, 1.6, 937 save percentage, so that's really good as well. He's well above expected, 83rd percentile there, and the team defense, as we mentioned, still really good. Over the last month, he's got a 937 save percentage, 3 wins in 6 games. Even though LA was struggling mightily in that stretch, they had a really horrible time over the 10 or 11 game stretch where they only had 1 or 2 wins, I believe. And Riddick was the guy that was getting those wins. So this is an interesting development. Hopefully, he's not going to supplant Cam Talbot if you're a Talbot owner, but if you have him and you're looking for some better numbers, at least in the short term, Riddick could be a nice handcuff option there. Now, up next is a guy that I streamed last week, had a really quality start, and helped me be competitive in the goaltending section of my categories league, and that is Peter Mrazek. Now, you're not going to get a lot of wins out of him. That's to be expected as he plays for Chicago, but he's got 3 wins in his last 6 and a 923 save percentage. So he's getting a decent amount of volume. He's getting a ton of save volume if you're getting points for total saves. He is a little bit above expected. The team defense isn't quite as bad as you would expect from a team that's got so many injuries in terms of Chicago. And they're, expected to be one of the worst teams in the league as is. So the fact that they're not playing poor defensive hockey is really interesting. And Mrazek is their starter. Clearly, Soderblom also gets some starts, but Mrazek is the guy they go to in the big situations. He's been improving all weeks except for this one right here where he did regress a little bit, but now he's up to a 68. So he is a little bit better over this last month and a half maybe. So if he's available and you want to stream him for a game, I don't know if I would hold on to him longer term, but 31% owned, so he's probably there for you in a 12-team league, and he is one of those reliable streaming options if you can get a decent matchup out of it, if they're playing another one of the bottom feeder teams, not necessarily one of the top teams. But one team that doesn't seem to matter is Dallas, and they have maybe not a longer-term goaltending controversy, but a short-term controversy. So if you look over here, which goaltender do you think these stats belong to, Ottinger or Wedgwood? And I think it's pretty obvious here that I'm featuring Scott Wedgwood because these numbers are his. 941 save percentage over the last 2 weeks. You can see here from a 45 to a 50 all the way up to a 54, and that's because he doesn't play a lot, so his games played volume is not that high. The save percentage percentile is relatively low from earlier sample size when he was the starter. Now he's the backup with Ottinger. That's the role that he should be in. When he's been a backup, he's been very consistent over the past number of years, putting up really good save percentage, goals against numbers. The team defense is 76th percentile, which is why you would want exposure to them. Oh yeah, and Matt Murray, not that Matt Murray, the other Matt Murray, came in relief when Ottinger was out and got a shutout. So it's not just these two guys, it's the whole team that's playing really well in front of these goaltenders. At 22% owned, if you see Wedgwood starting, you can feel pretty confident that he's going to pick up a quality start for you. If not winning a game, definitely getting you good save percentage and good goals against. But that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully you got something positive out of it. If you did, let me know in the comments section below. And as always, I will see you in the next one.